Now, concern is growing about President Obama's policies in Syria and whether they have hurt the United States' credibility abroad. In an op-ed for the Boston Herald, economist Peter Morici says the president has refused to make tough choices and instead punted the ball to a deeply divided Congress, a move he says makes the president look weak and will diminish already declining U.S. prestige in the world. Monica Crowley is a Fox News contributor, author, and radio talk show host. What do you think about what Professor Morici had to say?
I agree with his assessment. President Obama has made a hash of Syria policy, if you can even call this incoherent mess a policy. And the objective of his speech this week was essentially to try to clarify what he meant, so not just the American people in the Congress understood what he meant, but so that our adversaries would understand what he meant as well. And instead of clarifying and building support, his speech actually had the opposite effect. So when you look at poll numbers now, among the American people, about 70% do not want to see a military strike against Syria. When you look at Congress, it's more deeply divided than ever. And in fact, you have more and more members of Congress now committed to a no vote on a Syria strike. And internationally, he is absolutely right. Our prestige, which was already at a low ebb, is now even worse, in worse position than ever before. And the piece of evidence of that is Vladimir Putin's essay yesterday in the New York Times.
I was struck when I saw that essay by the opening line. He wrote, "Recent events surrounding Syria have prompted me to speak directly to the American people and their political leaders. It is important to do so at a time of insufficient communication between our societies." Isn't that a dig at the fact that the president canceled that summit over the Edward Snowden affair?
Well, I'll tell you one thing. President Nixon used to say that during the Cold War, that the problem between the United States and the Soviet Union wasn't that we didn't understand each other or didn't communicate. It was that we understood each other very well, and our systems were so incredibly different that there was no reconciling the two ideologies and national interests. And in this case, it's the same thing, John. The Russians know exactly where Obama is coming from. They have run circles around him since he became president, and certainly this last episode has allowed Vladimir Putin to run the entire board on Syria.
Yeah, so now Vladimir Putin rides into the rescue and looks like the world leader who has a grasp of affairs and with his say-so can make the Syrians give up their weapons,
peacemaker.
Calm down the Middle East, and throw a cold water on a raging fire.
What about the irony that the old top KGB guy is now perceived as the peacemaker in the world, right? Look, the Russians have been shut out of the greater Middle East since the early 1970s, thanks to President Nixon, who made that happen. In one fell swoop, Barack Obama's incredible incompetence on Syria has allowed the Russians another foothold into the region and positioned Vladimir Putin as the dominant player in the region. So now they are running the show, not just in Syria, but with the Iranians, who they're also arming. They've helped the Iranians with their nuclear weapons program. They will continue to do that. So now the Russians are essentially running the global chessboard because the American commander-in-chief has essentially checked out.
So you think Vladimir Putin is schooling this president on world affairs?
Well, in many ways. And in fact, that op-ed in the New York Times, essentially Putin is trolling America right now. And this is the position that we're in. Our influence, our power, and our prestige is at an incredibly low ebb. I would say probably worse off now than we were under Jimmy Carter. And that's saying something.
Well, and the polls seem to reflect, Americans' satisfaction with the president's handling of the Syria crisis. That number keeps
remember,
dropping. John,
after the assassination of Osama bin Laden, that was Barack Obama's one sort of shining point among the polls. I mean, people didn't approve of his handling of the economy and a number of other issues. Foreign policy was it for him, and now even that's sliding.
Monica Crowley, our Fox News contributor. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Jenna.